I never imagined my life could turn into a thriller, yet here I was, heart hammering, staring at a cup of coffee that smelled wrong. "Don't you want to try the coffee I made, just for you, darling?" Nathan asked, his smile oddly tight, like it had been pressed into place with invisible hands. His eyes, however, told a different story, a flicker of something I couldn't yet name. We were at my sister-in-law Lila's house in Charleston, South Carolina, gathered for the monthly family brunch she so meticulously hosted. The large mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, adorned with fresh flowers and crystal glasses, but all I could focus on was the strange metallic scent rising from the cup in front of me. I am Evelyn Harper, 31 years old, marketing executive, normally trusting, but after 3 years of what I now suspect were coincidental incidents of severe food poisoning, my instincts screamed danger. Lila had always had a way of orchestrating chaos while smiling angelically, and Nathan, well, he had been her accomplice, knowingly or unknowingly. "Now, how thoughtful of you," I said, forcing a smile while my stomach twisted. I pretended to inhale the aroma of the coffee like it was normal, but it reminded me of last month's tea incident. An afternoon that had landed me in urgent care, my stomach tied in knots, doctors baffled, Lila insisting everything had been made correctly. Lila leaned back, her fingers tracing the rim of her own cup, deliberately leaving it untouched. "Nathan has been practicing new brewing techniques just for you," she said, emphasizing the words "for you" like a sinister note in a lullaby. I felt a chill run down my spine. I noticed Nathan checking his watch, then glancing subtly toward Lila. The brief exchange was almost imperceptible, but I caught it. Something about the way they moved, the timing, the way Lila's gaze lingered on me, it all screamed warning. "Thanks," I murmured, lifting my cup without drinking, pretending to sip, all the while plotting my next move. My hand shook slightly, but no one could tell. I needed confirmation. I needed evidence. My own safety depended on it, and I wasn't about to let them see that I suspected anything. "Oh, would you excuse me for a moment?" I said suddenly, standing, letting my phone buzz as a pretense. "I need to make a quick call." I deliberately tripped near Lila's side, creating a momentary distraction, and switched our cups in the confusion. "Oh, I'm so clumsy," I said, straightening up with exaggerated effort. Lila gave a tight smile, brushing it off. "Just don't break anything in the study," she said, unaware of what had just happened. Heart pounding, I retreated to the study, safe behind its door. From there, I watched them. Lila lifted the coffee, now swapped, and sipped. My stomach clenched. Part of me wanted to rush out and stop her, but I needed them caught. I needed the truth documented. I thought back to when it all began. 3 years ago, Nathan had been charming and attentive when we met at a colleague's wedding in Charleston. Lila seemed welcoming too, helping plan our wedding, attending family dinners and offering advice. I should have noticed the first red flag, the subtle ways she'd undermine me. A spill on my dress at a key presentation, a dish over-seasoned when she had helped cook. Nathan had always laughed it off, offering some benign excuse, but patterns emerged. The worst incident had been 2 months ago, breakfast at Lila's. I woke up hours later in the hospital, confused and feverish. Doctors found substances they couldn't identify. Nathan had spun a convincing story. It must have been expired medication, Evelyn. The pattern, however, was now undeniable. I gripped the doorframe, anxiety clawing at me, as I watched Lila's hands tremor. Blee. Nathan looked at her, confusion slowly morphing into horror as he realized which cup she had drunk. "Lila, what's happening?" he stammered. Her hands shook violently. She tried to rise but clutched the table for support. What did you put in that coffee? I demanded, stepping out of the study, phone recording. My calm voice belied the adrenaline surging through me. Nathan froze. That wasn't supposed to be your cup, he whispered. But the words carried, sharp and clear. Lila's eyes widened in fear as reality hit her. "Call an ambulance!" she gasped, collapsing to the floor. I dialed 911 without hesitation, hands steady despite the chaos. "Emergency services, 1542 Magnolia Lane. My sister-in-law is experiencing severe reactions to a beverage. She is conscious, but trembling violently." Lila's cold calculation was gone. Raw fear replaced it. Nathan's panic escalated as he realized the plan had backfired. The paramedics arrived within minutes, moving swiftly. I stayed close, recording, making sure there was no doubt about their intentions. Lila was loaded onto a stretcher, trembling, eyes wide. Nathan stood frozen, watching the situation crumble. In the hospital, I waited while doctors assessed her. Dr. Eliza Phillips, tall, with greying hair and sharp eyes, approached. "Mrs. Harper, we've identified unusual substances in her system. This isn't accidental." I played the recording of brunch aloud, Nathan's silence, Lila's trembling confession, their whispered plans, it all fit. Dr. Phillips's face hardened as she took notes. These compounds aren't accessible to the general public. This was deliberate. Nathan appeared, face pale, sweating. "Christina, he began, but Dr. Phillips intercepted him, pressing the call button. Security arrived, positioning guards beside him. Lila and Nathan's conspiracy was unraveling. The texts I had secretly backed up, the patterns I had documented over months, the emergency visits, they all painted a damning picture. I stayed calm, even as tremors ran through my own body, from fear and adrenaline. Every incident, every hospital visit, every missed client presentation, it had all been orchestrated. And now, finally, the evidence was undeniable. Detective Mendoza arrived, professional and commanding. She listened to my recordings, reviewed the texts, and scrutinized my logs of symptoms, dates, and incidents. Her expression was one of grave determination. "Mrs. Harper will need full statements and warrants for both their homes and offices." As the investigation gained momentum, I realized the stakes. Lila's usual confidence had vanished, Nathan's composure shattered. I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was emerging, and there was no turning back. I sat in the waiting room, phone in hand, replaying the recordings. My mind ran through the months of deception, manipulation, and betrayal. The adrenaline gradually transformed into resolve. I wasn't a victim. I was the person who would ensure justice was served. Hours later, Dr. Phillips returned with initial toxicology results. Lila's body had significant levels of substances not found naturally, not something that could have accidentally been in her coffee. The plan had been clear: incapacitate me, ruin my career, and steal opportunities from right under my nose. And just like that, the seemingly perfect brunch had turned into the beginning of their unraveling. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room felt almost cruelly bright as I clutched my phone, reviewing the recordings again and again. Each replay confirmed what I already knew. Nathan and Lila had been plotting against me for months. The tremors, the hospital visits, the missed meetings, it all pointed to one thing: deliberate sabotage. And now, armed with proof, I could finally act. Dr. Phillips approached me, her tablet in hand. "Evelyn, the toxicology screens show multiple compounds in Lila's system. None of them are common household chemicals. These are controlled substances used in clinical trials, not something the average person can access. I nodded, trying to steady my hands. So every hospital visit I had, the unexplained symptoms, the nausea, the dizziness, those match the compounds you've found? Yes, she said. Your description of the incidents is consistent with the effects of these substances, though thankfully your dosages were lower. Whoever administered them knew what they were doing. My stomach churned at the thought. They hadn't just been careless. They'd been methodical, precise, calculating. Detective Mendoza arrived moments later, her presence commanding. She introduced herself again, though I'd already met her in passing during the initial evidence collection. Evelyn, I need a full account of everything. Each incident, each hospital visit, every unusual symptom. It's important we build a comprehensive timeline. I pulled out the document I had meticulously maintained for months. Dates, times, symptoms, details of each meal or drink, what I was doing at the time, even notes on Nathan and Lila's behavior. I've been keeping track since the first incident, I explained. I suspected something wasn't right, but I had no proof. Now, with these recordings, I handed her my phone. This will help connect the dots. She nodded, scrolling through my files. Excellent. This, combined with the toxicology report and witness statements, will be enough to secure a warrant for both their homes and offices. We'll need access to everything, computers, phones, personal records, and we'll need statements from anyone who may have seen suspicious behavior. As she spoke, Nathan appeared at the end of the hallway, face pale and sweaty. Evelyn, this is a misunderstanding. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, keeping my voice calm. And now the authorities will understand too. Security moved Nathan back and gestured for him to remain in the hallway. Lila lay in the hospital bed, weak but conscious, her face a mixture of fear and disbelief. The confident, polished woman I had known had vanished, replaced by someone fragile and exposed. Over the next few hours, Detective Mendoza and her team worked methodically. Officers collected Nathan's phone, Lila's devices, and documents from Lila's purse and office. Toxicology samples were doubled for forensic analysis. My detailed records and recordings were logged as evidence. Each step reinforced the meticulous nature of their crimes. What you've done, Evelyn, Mendoza said quietly as she reviewed my files, has likely saved your life, and potentially others. Many people wouldn't have thought to gather this level of evidence. I exhaled slowly. I didn't trust myself to rely solely on instinct anymore. I had to document everything. The forensic team would need hours to process everything, but in the meantime, Detective Mendoza and Dr. Phillips began preparing their statements for the upcoming legal proceedings. I realized this was only the beginning. Nathan and Lila's actions weren't just domestic sabotage, they were criminal. Attempted poisoning, conspiracy, and premeditated intent to harm. Later that evening, the hospital was quieter. Lila's tremors had lessened, though she remained pale and shaken. I approached her cautiously, phone still recording for the sake of evidence. Lila, I began softly, I need you to understand. Everything is on record. Every conversation, every action. You and Nathan can't manipulate this situation anymore. The truth is out. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, realizing fully for the first time that her games had failed. Evelyn, I didn't think. You didn't think, I asked, my voice firm. You didn't think about the consequences of poisoning someone, about the law, about me, about yourselves. You both underestimated me, and you paid the price for it. Nathan, still visible through the hallway window, sank into a chair, head in his hands. Lila's shoulders slumped, the fight drained from her body. For the first time, I saw them as they truly were, desperate, scared, and powerless. By the next morning, warrants had been issued for both their homes and offices. Detective Mendoza and a small team executed them efficiently, collecting notebooks, computers, bottles, and vials with suspicious labels. Each item was carefully catalogued, photographed, and logged. I watch you. It is evidence mounted. Photos of vials labeled with dosages, notes detailing symptoms, even a calendar marking key client meetings, alongside a handwritten plan to ensure I would be absent from presentations. It was all there, clear, damning. The legal team working with Detective Mendoza began preparing the case against Nathan and Lila. The pattern of escalating behavior, the premeditation, the repeated attempts to incapacitate me, it all painted a picture too clear to ignore. We have a strong case, Mendoza said. Attempted poisoning, conspiracy, and premeditated intent to harm. It's rare to see such detailed documentation from a victim, but you've made this airtight. I spent the next few days at the hospital, balancing concern for Lila's well-being with the need to provide detailed statements. Dr. Phillips updated me regularly on the medical side. The substances found could have been fatal at higher concentrations. Your records, Evelyn, indicate that they were carefully increasing dosages each time to gauge effects. I nodded, absorbing the weight of their calculation. It was chilling. They hadn't just acted impulsively. They had approached this like an experiment, studying how I reacted, measuring my vulnerability. Back at home, I organized everything I had collected. Digital backups of recordings, copies of all suspicious texts, hospital records from previous incidents, and my ongoing logs of symptoms and circumstances. Every scrap of evidence was catalogued, time-stamped, and ready for submission. Even amidst the chaos, I had to plan strategically. This wasn't about revenge, it was about protection, justice, and ensuring I could continue my career without fear. The Henderson account presentation, which had been their target, was only the beginning. I had worked too hard to let them derail my professional life. Detective Mendoza returned the next day with preliminary forensic reports. The bottles we collected from Nathan's office contained multiple substances that are controlled in clinical research. The company listed on the labels has confirmed these were obtained illegally through a former colleague of his. I felt a chill as the magnitude of their actions sank in. Not only had they tried to harm me, but Nathan had used connections from his college days to acquire illegal compounds. The seriousness of the crime was undeniable. The day of the first formal interview arrived. I recounted step by step every incident, every oddity, and every symptom I experienced. I remained calm, precise, and measured, despite the anxiety gnawing at me. Detective Mendoza took notes, occasionally asking for clarifications. Every answer, every detail I provided added weight to the growing case against them. Nathan and Lila's patterns of behavior, subtle manipulations, escalating dosage attempts, and strategic targeting of important client meetings emerged as a calculated and cruel design. Each time I thought back to hospital visits or missed opportunities, I realized how closely their plan had followed a timeline meant to remove me from my professional path permanently. As the week progressed, the forensic team confirmed my suspicions. Every incident matched substances from the bottles and vials collected. Each hospital visit had a traceable link. Every suspicious message, every whispered plan, every act of poisoning, they all converged into a clear, undeniable sequence. Through it all, I remained focused on what mattered, protecting myself, ensuring Lila received care, and preparing for the inevitable legal proceedings. Every step I had taken, from secretly documenting incidents to recording confessions, was proving invaluable. I wasn't just a witness, I was the architect of their capture. By the time the first court proceedings were scheduled, Nathan and Lila had been charged with multiple counts: attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit harm, and possession of controlled substances. The evidence was overwhelming. As I prepared for the trial, I realized something profound. The ordeal had transformed me. The fear, the uncertainty, and the repeated attempts on my life had forged a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The same cunning and strategy that Lila and Nathan had tried to use against me, I had turned into tools of survival and justice. The Henderson account presentation, which had been the spark for their plot, had become a symbol of my perseverance. I was determined not only to protect my career, but to ensure that those who had sought to destroy me faced the consequences of their actions. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest until every heartbeat feels like a drum in your ears. I gripped the wooden edges of my chair, careful to stay composed, though inside I was a storm of adrenaline, relief, and disbelief. Every detail, every note, every recording I had painstakingly gathered over months was about to be laid bare for the world to see. My hands trembled slightly, but my mind was sharper than ever. This was my moment to ensure justice, not just for myself, but for anyone who might fall prey to those who cloak malice in a friendly smile. The prosecutor called their first witness, a toxicology expert, who walked us through the results from each of the hospital visits I had endured over the past 6 months. I listened as they described the specific compounds, their effects on the human body, and how they had been systematically administered in doses meant to incapacitate but not necessarily kill at first, gradually increasing in potency over time. Every word reaffirmed my decisions to document, to record, to never trust the seemingly ordinary interactions I had endured at the hands of James and Nina. When Dr. Phillips was called to testify, my stomach tightened with anticipation. She had been instrumental in decoding the exact substances and the methods of administration. As she spoke, I noticed the judge leaning forward, the court reporter's fingers flying across the keyboard, and even the jurors shifting in their seats. They could see the meticulousness of the pattern, the premeditation, the escalation, and the sinister calculation behind each attempt on my health. "Dr. Phillips," the prosecutor asked, her tone deliberate, "would you summarize the progression of these poisonings in terms of intent?" Dr. Phillips nodded solemnly. Each incident was not random. The doses were adjusted based on previous reactions, showing clear intent to incapacitate or potentially harm the individual involved. Her eyes briefly flicked toward Nina, who was visibly pale, fingers twisting the hospital blanket she had been forced to wear in court. I felt a shiver of vindication. For so long, I had doubted myself. I had second-guessed every upset stomach, every dizzy spell, every emergency room visit. But the evidence was undeniable now. My instincts had been correct, my caution justified. Next came the recordings. I had debated for hours whether to play them in court, fearful that it would somehow feel like a personal attack. The prosecution insisted it was necessary. As the first clip played, Nina's voice rang out, confident, calculating, her words slicing through the tense courtroom air. "The Henderson account is worth millions, James. We can't let her ruin everything we've worked for. Just stick to the plan. A few days of illness should be enough." The jury shifted, a few gasps audible. I felt my pulse surge, not from fear, but from the empowerment of knowing the truth was finally exposed. I watched James slump further in his chair, hands clenching as if trying to physically restrain the guilt now pressing down on him. Then came his voice, calm, methodical, terrifyingly matter-of-fact, as if discussing a project rather than a human life. "I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it to the presentation." I swallowed hard, but my hands remained steady. For years I had endured subtle sabotage, orchestrated humiliation, and near poisonings, and now, as the evidence unspooled in front of the court, the masks they had worn were stripped away. The cross-examination was brutal. The defense tried to downplay each incident as coincidence, accidents, or misinterpretations. They argued that James and Nina had been overworked, stressed, and perhaps miscommunicated. But the prosecution methodically dismantled each claim, each hospital visit, each mysterious symptom, each recorded conversation was irrefutable. The pattern could not be ignored, explained away, or rationalized. Throughout the trial, I maintained my composure, though I won't lie. There were moments when the anger bubbled dangerously close to the surface. I had spent months reliving the fear, the pain, and the betrayal, and yet I forced myself to remain objective, to let the evidence speak louder than my emotions. This was about justice, about proving that manipulation and greed could be exposed and punished, no matter how deeply they were buried behind smiles and polite conversation. Witness after witness took the stand, colleagues, hospital staff, forensic analysts, all corroborating the narrative I had pieced together. And then, finally, the climax. The surveillance footage from my home and Nina and James's office, which showed small bottles, labelled and meticulously logged, being handled with care, and notes detailing each dosage and reaction. The jury leaned forward, some mouths slightly agape, as the prosecution explained the calculated nature of the plan. I caught my reflection in the polished courtroom glass. Gone was the timid, cautious woman who had begun this ordeal 3 years ago. In her place was someone battle-hardened, resilient, and unwaveringly determined to protect herself and her career. By the 3rd week, the momentum of the trial was undeniable. The defense had little left to argue. Nina and James, once confident in their manipulations, now sat defeated, their carefully constructed facade crumbling with each piece of damning evidence. I could see the reality settling in for them, their greed, their envy, and their willingness to harm someone for personal gain had finally caught up with them. And then came the verdict. The courtroom held its collective breath as the judge read aloud. On counts of attempted murder, conspiracy, and premeditated assault, the defendants are found guilty on all charges. Relief and vindication flooded through me, mingled with a deep, quiet sorrow for what had almost been. Nina's eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of fear and realization. James's face was ashen, his shoulders slumped, his freedom forever stripped away by the consequences of his actions. The sentence was severe but just, years behind bars for both, ensuring they could no longer harm anyone else. Justice, finally, had been served. Weeks after the trial, life slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy, though nothing would ever be quite the same. I found solace in my work, in my growing reputation as a marketing executive who had not only survived betrayal, but had turned it into a platform for growth and recognition. The Henderson account, the one that had sparked months of malicious plotting, flourished under my guidance, leading to additional major client contracts and solidifying my position in the industry. I took time to mentor young professionals, sharing the lessons I had learned, not just about business, but about vigilance, integrity, and the importance of trusting one's instincts. I became a living example that even when surrounded by deceit, careful observation, documentation, and courage could tip the scales toward justice. One evening, I received a letter from the Henderson client confirming a 3-year contract renewal and expressing admiration for my resilience and professionalism. I smiled, thinking back to that brunch, the first suspicious cup of coffee, and the months of fear and uncertainty that had led to this triumph. The best revenge, I realized, was not retaliation, but success achieved with integrity, perseverance, and the refusal to be intimidated by those who sought to manipulate and harm. As I prepared for my next keynote at the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, I felt a quiet pride. Looking out at the sea of faces, I spoke not just about business acumen, but about courage, the courage to stand firm, to document, to trust one's intuition, and to face betrayal with strength. Success, I explained, is not just about talent or hard work. It is about integrity, vigilance, and the ability to turn adversity into opportunity. The room erupted in applause. But I knew the real victory had been private, within the months of careful planning, documentation, and unwavering resolve that had ultimately exposed the truth. And though Nina and James had tried to manipulate, intimidate, and poison my life away, their failure was now permanent. I had emerged not just unharmed, but stronger, wiser, and more respected than ever before. As I left the conference hall, a young professional approached me, her eyes bright with curiosity and determination. "How did you stay calm throughout it all?" she asked. I smiled, thinking of the recordings, the logs, the careful observations, and the knowledge that truth was on my side. "Trust yourself," I said. "Document everything, stay vigilant, and never let fear dictate your actions. Success comes to those who act with integrity, even when the world seems against them." And as I walked out into the crisp Nashville evening, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I had accomplished. Not just survival, but triumph. Not just vindication, but empowerment. And in that moment, I knew that no one, not even those closest to me, could ever take that away.